Moving on to Washington, both sides of politics seem to be girding for budget battles in the coming days. And we've just had remarks this morning from both the president and the majority leader in the House, Eric Cantor. Have a listen.
What we now have is an ideological fight that's been mounted in the House of Representatives that says we're not going to pass a budget and we will threaten a government shutdown unless we repeal the Affordable Care Act.
A plan to extend our nation's ability to borrow while delaying Obamacare and protecting working middle-class families from its horrific effects.
Welcome back to Opinion Journal. I'm Mary Kissel. I've got Fox News commentator and author Monica Crowley here to talk about this budget battle that we just heard. Monica, there doesn't seem to be a lot of room for compromise on either side. The president says he's never going to defund Obamacare. He's not going to negotiate. But just this morning, we saw the House GOP say we're going to tie defunding Obamacare to funding government. Is this a government shutdown?
Here we go again, right? I mean, we've seen this pattern over the last several years where both sides wait until the last minute and then everybody in Washington runs around with their hair on fire as the American people are wondering, where's the budget? Why can't we have any kind of fiscal discipline or responsibility? So here we go again. The difference this time, Mary, is that what you saw this morning, the president said, look, I have no intention on negotiating. You had Eric Cantor inviting the president to come to the table and negotiate. But what we've seen the pattern with this president is that he doesn't negotiate. He doesn't consult with Congress, even members of his own party. He doesn't tend to build coalitions and really work and consult and compromise and negotiate. He doesn't do that. I don't think he's going to change this time around. But what is different is Obamacare. Obamacare is a huge dynamic in this budget process, and it's going to play into both sides' politics. This president will never give up 1 inch on Obamacare. He's done waivers, he's done exemptions, he's done the employer mandate and waived that for a year. So he's chipped away at it, but he's never going to let the whole thing go because that's his signature achievement.
This is what I don't
but the public is completely against it.
Okay, the public's against it, but the Republicans don't own Congress. They only control one house.
Right.
And they did have leverage called the sequester. They didn't have to do anything to keep these government funding cuts going. If they had just stuck together, the president would have had to come to them. So, how do you view the situation that they've boxed themselves into
Republicans
now?
Sticking together? Mary, if that ever happened, that would be a real moment in time.
It's a problem, though. It's a big problem.
I think that the Republicans are right, though, to drive the stake into the ground on Obamacare. We saw new polling this week showing increasingly the American people hate this thing. Almost 2/3 want it repealed either in total or in part. So the Republicans have the American people with them on their side. In fact, Rasmussen yesterday released a poll showing 51% of Americans actually prefer to see a government shutdown if it will stop the funding for socialized medicine.
So you think that a government shutdown wouldn't hurt Republicans?
Here's what I'm saying. Tom Graves, coming out of the House just a couple of days ago, put a piece of legislation in front of the Congress, and it looks like Boehner and Cantor are going to move on it. What it says is we fully intend to fund every other facet of the government except for Obamacare. If they go ahead and vote on that in the House, and it passes the House, then it goes to the Senate where the real game is. What Republicans can win this fight politically. They have the American people on their side. What they have to win, Mary, is the messaging. Okay, and I have very little faith in the Republicans to win the messaging on this.
But what we've argued on the editorial pages, if the Republicans had just said, let's continue funding government with these sequester cuts, they pass it, they throw it up to the Senate can't mess with it. But now what they're doing is they're saying to the Senate, please layer in tax increases, whatever you'd like into this bill, open it up. And then they're going to throw it right back to the House.
I'll tell you, I agree with that, but I'll tell you why the Obamacare battle is the battle to have, because it's socialized medicine and it will blow up every other part of the economy. We can talk about tax reform until we're blue in the face. That will not. There'll be no movement on any of these things if Obamacare goes forward. Defunding it is literally politically the battle that the Republicans should fight, and that hill they should die on. But also remember that it has huge implications for this economy if it is allowed to go forward in whatever form. And I know some of my fellow conservatives on the editorial page, let it go forward, let the disaster happen, hang it on the necks of the Democrats next year in 2014. And yes, and I understand that argument. But once it goes forward and the benefits start flowing and the checks start going, you will never be able to repeal it or take it back,
sign the bill to defund it in a government shutdown.
That's
don't
correct.
Think Republicans
but
are going to get blamed.
this is my point about messaging. Republicans have to get their act together to make sure the public knows that if there is a partial government shutdown, it's not the Republicans' fault. They passed a bill to fund every other part of the U.S. government except for the thing that Americans hate, which is Obamacare.
It looks like it's a wager that the president is willing to take based on his comments this morning.
But remember, his presidency has been weakened in large part because of his mishandling of Syria. A lot of Democrats, the New York Times today has a front page story about the Democrats very frustrated, not willing to toe the line for him that much anymore.
Right.
So he's going into these budget battles weakened on his own flank.
Okay.
So we'll see.
Well, you've got both sides of the argument. Fox News commentator and author Monica Crowley, thank you so much for being on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you.